Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. So the Browns are back in Berea today, practicing for the first time that they have since they made the big Joe Flacco trade. And we got some interesting tidbits dropped on us about the Joe Flacco trade that made me ask some questions, right? Again, I left today with more questions than answers about how they feel with the quarterback situation behind Dillon Gabriel, right? We know that Dillon's the starter for now, but like, how do they feel about what's going on behind him? I don't know. And I would say after today's press conferences, I'm even more concerned about how they feel about what's going on behind Dillon Gabriel. And look, you could call me alarmist for this. I've just watched a lot of Cleveland Browns football in my life. And I've watched a lot of Browns Steelers games in Pittsburgh. And I know that a rule of thumb in that game is that anything that can go wrong will go wrong for the Browns in a game versus Pittsburgh, even if you're better than Pittsburgh that year. There's been multiple years in the Stefanski era where the Browns were better than Pittsburgh. They go into that game, weird stuff happens. The Duck Hodges year, all kind of stuff, right? I've seen it all. Whether the Browns have a starting quarterback or not, there's just been strangeness with that game in Pittsburgh. And going into that game with so much uncertainty at the backup quarterback position, to me, feels like a recipe for disaster. It feels like it has the potential to, unfortunately, create a very memorable moment for Browns fans. And not one of them good memorable moments. One of them bad memorable moments that we talk about forever, right? It just feels like we are leaving ourselves very vulnerable in a week historically where this team is very vulnerable to something especially embarrassing happening. Now, again, I might just be overly concerned, but nothing I heard in this press conference gives me confidence about backup quarterback right now. And you might be asking, Quincy, it doesn't matter what's going on with backup quarterback. Dillon Gabriel is a starter. There are just some realities that people have to face with Dillon Gabriel, whether you like Dillon Gabriel or not. Dillon Gabriel is 5'11". He's 200 pounds. And this offensive line has at best been shaky. And think what you want of Pittsburgh and what they've done throughout the season, which has not been impressive defensively. They still have Nick Herbig. They still have Alex Highsmith. They still have TJ Watt. They still have Cam Hayward. Derek Harmon is a fun prospect, right, that they have on that defensive line. If the Browns' offensive line is not playing well, they have enough guys to punish you. And historically speaking, the Steelers have found a way to do this against the Cleveland Browns, especially in Pittsburgh. If this game were in Cleveland, it's a different story. That usually goes our way. But the in Pittsburgh game, it's usually not a game that goes our way. And you're throwing Dillon into that. He's going to have to deal with that. I don't know if Cam Robinson's going to be ready to play left tackle. I don't even know if that's going to make that much of a difference. But that's the situation you're throwing him into. He could get hit a lot. It's not inconceivable that the Browns would have to play their backup quarterback. So if it feels like I'm spending a lot of time about the backup quarterback, it's not for no reason. Sorry for the double negative there. But I think it is for a good reason. It is not a wild thought here. If the Browns have to play their backup here, I'm not going to be sitting here in the post game like, well, you couldn't anticipate that. No, I can anticipate that could happen. So for them to trade Joe Flacco, I don't mind doing it. It's not like Joe Flacco was like playing so amazing that we had to keep him out there. Hell, he wouldn't be the backup quarterback if he was playing good. He was terrible. And you can argue that the Browns contributed to that terrible. I would argue that the Browns contributed to that terrible. I think the offensive line especially contributed to that terrible. And I hope that Joe Flacco, by the way, plays well in Cincinnati. I know some people are going to use if he plays well against Cincinnati and the Browns offense struggles against Kevin, which is fair. It's fine, right? Like I think it's a little bit different because Joe has Jamar Chase, but so did Jake Browning, right? So maybe it's not all that different, right? However that goes, that's going to be a look for Kevin Stefanski. But if we're looking at this from a Browns perspective, if this goes well for Cincinnati, they get they win 9 games, maybe make the playoffs. I think that's probably the best thing for the Browns if that happens for Cincinnati. And that's simply because I think the worst thing for the Browns in the AFC North is if Cincinnati flames out this year, gets a top 5 pick, and has to fire Zach Taylor. Because I think Zach Taylor's holding that team back. If they get somebody competent in there coaching that team, like a Joe Brady or something like that, then I think they're going to really unlock Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And don't let them get a top 5 pick and get their hands on an elite defensive player, which could help fix their biggest hole on the team, which is the defense. So yeah, if you asking me, I hope Joe Flacco does well because I don't really care much for Cincinnati blowing it up and getting a top 5 pick. I think that would make them better. I think what would make them worse is just more of the same, right? Barely sneak into the playoffs, maybe win a game, lose in the second round. Yeah, it keeps Joe Burrow not being as dangerous as Joe Burrow should be, right? But that's just me, right? I think that's better for the Browns long term. If it's better for Kevin Stefanski, I don't know. People are going to probably compare that success against whatever he's doing. And if the Browns offense isn't scoring points, then yeah, people are going to look at that negatively towards him. But what's best for Kevin Stefanski was best for the Browns long term. We'll see if that continues to be aligned. But Joe Flacco, whatever he does in Cincinnati aside, at the very least, if he had to come into a game, like let's say Dylan got injured last week or this week, and Joe Flacco came in, at the very least, you know that he is qualified to be a backup, that he is competent enough to fulfill the role of backup. Whether you want him as a starter or not, Joe Flacco is a competent backup. I mean, the Bengals just traded for him to be the starter. So there was always that. Now they're in a situation where it doesn't even feel like they're comfortable committing to Shador as the backup. But they're also not super comfortable committing to Bailey Zapp as the backup. And it makes me very concerned that they feel like there's only one quarterback that is capable of playing right now, and that quarterback is Dylan Gabriel. That's not good, in my opinion. That has a lot of potential to blow up like an Acme Dynamite kit in the Browns' face. You know, like I just hope that there, again, was in this decision-making more allowance for how they felt about Shador and how they felt about what they have behind the quarterback position right now. Because if you listen to what's coming out of Berea, again, it's not very encouraging stuff that you're hearing about the backup situation. You're right. Now, what was interesting is that, you know, they make the trade. They announced that Shador is going to be expected to be the backup, or at least people leak out. It wasn't announced. Browns didn't announce it. It was leaked out that they expect Shador to be the backup. And then we get to this press conference today, and everybody's reaction to this press conference is, I think Bailey Zapp might be the backup this week. That's not good. That don't smell right to me. And I don't mean it in this is a conspiracy theory, they're working against Shedeur. I mean this simply in what is going on in there with the development of him, that they would make and it's not because it's some kind of conspiracy against Shedeur. I don't think that's the case. It's also not, in my opinion, because it would be a red flag if Shedeur's not ready to be a backup. I think it is perfectly okay at this point in the season if they feel like Shedeur's not ready to be a backup and they want to wait till later in the season. It's the indecision of it all, right? Like that they seemingly made this trade without really knowing what they want to do at backup is more of what bothers me about the process of this. So here's why I think this, right? I kind of walked through how I think, but I didn't really explain why it is I think it. So let me go back here and kind of explain why it is that I have this specific concern about this specific trade. But before I do that, I want to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. Okay, so Kevin Stefanski's press conference, right? The report is that Shedeur is supposed to be the backup. That's what came out. That's what people were, pushing out there. Now, maybe it's the case, and I do have to leave room for this, and I think everybody else should leave room for this. Maybe it's the case that somebody just got bad information and assumed that Shedeur was going to be the backup when no decision or determination had even been close to being made. That might be it, right? The report did come out very quickly after the trade. But still, I have questions about why you would trade Joe Flacco when you aren't 100% sure what you're going to do with your backup quarterback situation this week. Maybe, again, some people might say I'm having too much of a concern about this. Some people might say I'm not having enough, right? But the reason, again, I have this concern is I'm listening to the quotes that Kevin Stefanski himself is putting out here. Browns coach is from Daniel Fuise's Twitter. Make sure y'all check him out. Browns coach Kevin Stefanski said the Joe Flacco trade took us all by surprise. It's an interesting quote. And that the Bengals reached out to them. So that first part of the quote, the Bengals Joe Flacco trade took us all by surprise that the Bengals reached out to them. So the Bengals called them, and basically the Bengals offered the Browns a price for Joe Flacco that they knew that they weren't going to refuse for Joe Flacco, right? And I know some people are like, well, we didn't even get that much for Joe Flacco. We just got a pick swap to a fifth. I would argue that getting anything for Joe Flacco is a lot for Joe Flacco, given how he played and the fact that he got benched as demonstrably as he got benched this year. But also getting a fifth round pick, even if you're exchanging a late sixth round pick or a projected late sixth round pick for it, is a massive swap as far as like what you should be able to get for Joe Flacco. The fact that you're netting a fifth round pick for Joe Flacco is insane. I'm sorry. I'm not going to get off that one, right? So they offered him the fifth rounder. The Browns said, hey, we can't turn down the opportunity to have 3 fifth round picks because you can turn 3 fifth round picks to maybe 2 fourth round picks, maybe even a third round pick, right? The value on that is just too much to let go past you. And it wasn't something that they were openly considering. I know some people are hitting me up asking me if this was like Joe Flacco requesting a trade. According to all reports, it was not Joe Flacco requesting a trade, and it was that the Cincinnati Bengals kind of just really wanted Joe Flacco for whatever reason. Again, I think the insistence on Joe Flacco on the Bengals part is a interesting insistence. Again, I think it says a lot about where the Bengals are as a front office and as a team right now, that they are this gung-ho and so gung-ho that they're willing to kind of pay a higher than market price for Joe Flacco, specifically, especially considering that he is a in-division trade. So they hit up the Cleveland Browns. The Browns were caught by surprise about the trade itself. Now, I heard some people kind of dice this up as like Andrew made the trade without Kevin knowing, and it caught Kevin by surprise. I think Kevin is saying the Joe Flacco trade, like them wanting to get Joe Flacco, is what took them by surprise. Not that the trade happened took him by surprise, because he uses the term took us by surprise, right? Not took me by surprise, which is an important distinction there. So there's that, right? Bengals were desperate. They called the Browns up. They really wanted Joe Flacco. You got a fifth. I understand why you take that. But then this part happens, and then like I'm a little bit more, okay, well, what's really going on with the backup quarterback situation? As far as if Shedeur will be the backup quarterback, Kevin Stefanski said, I'll let this week play out and make a decision later. Which is Kevin Stefanski talk for, I don't know, at best, and no, more than often, right? When he's not willing to give a straight answer, that usually says something, right? Because Kevin is usually, if he's not going to do something, he just says no, right? Remember, we went through this when they were going through the whole benching Joe Flacco thing. We're like, for 3 weeks, it was no, we're standing behind our guy. And then after it wasn't the Minnesota game, obviously. It was the Detroit game. The answer went from no to we'll see. And we'll see ended up becoming welcome your new starting quarterback, Dillon Gabriel. So that answer is interesting. He went on to say, all roster type of things, I always have to be mindful of our players and our players' development. And I want to make sure that I'm always doing what's best for our players and, of course, our team. Stefanski then continued to say, I trust in all of our players. I trust in their ability and those types of things. I just always want to set our guys up for success. When asked if what he needs to see from Sanders this week, Stefanski said, I wouldn't say that there's one thing I need to see. In my role, I have to do what's best for our players, our team, and I'm very, very invested in our player development, our young players' development, our quarterback development. So any decision I make, I just want to make sure I'm doing what's right for our players. It's interesting that he's asked about Shedeur being the backup, and his answer is 90% about player development, which tells you how they view Shedeur internally. I'm not saying it's positive or negative, but what feels like where we are with Shedeur, as far as where the Browns view Shedeur, you at home might view Shedeur differently. Me in this chair might view Shedeur differently, but we're not talking about how we feel. We're talking about how the Browns feel, right? Got to take your own feelings out of this. If we're talking about what's going on with the backup quarterback situation, he spent 90% of the time talking about Shedeur, talking about development and why he doesn't want to put somebody in early. It already, like, to me, that reads as a pretext for not making him the backup quarterback, which is interesting and not necessarily what a lot of people anticipated. myself included. Again, my hope was with this trade for Joe Flacco, or this trade of Joe Flacco, that they made it. Yeah, again, I don't think that they anticipated somebody wanting Joe Flacco, but they made the trade for Joe Flacco, and they said internally, well, we feel like we're at a good enough place with Shedeur where we can make this trade. We can get the extra fifth, and we can afford to make this trade. That's what my hope was. After this press conference, it is abundantly clear that that is not where we're at. Again, maybe you feel like Shedeur is there already. Maybe I feel like Shedeur is there already. But if we're talking about where the Browns are, that is clearly not where they're at. They wouldn't be waffling on whether he's the backup quarterback this week if that's where they were at. Even if they still make him the backup this week, this hesitation to do it says a lot. It just does. There's no way around that. It says a lot about how they feel. Now, they might not be right, but that's how they feel. And they feel that way based on what they've dealt with every day in that building. Again, it's up to you to determine what you want to take more seriously, how you feel about him or how the people who work with him every day feel about him. But it is clear that they view him as a developmental prospect who may not be ready to be the backup quarterback right now. Because if they felt like he was ready to be the backup quarterback, they would have made him the backup quarterback again. With Dillon Gabriel, who they felt like was ready to start, there was no waffle. Joe Flacco had that game where he played bad, and then, boom, next day, Dillon Gabriel's the starter. No waffle there. No, we'll wait till the end of the week. There was none of that. And I applauded that because you know what? You're going to make the kid the backup, then put him in the best position possible to succeed, put him in early in the week, right? With Shedeur, there's hesitancy. And I have to imagine that they feel that way for a reason. That's a bit more concerning. Now, again, there's two ways to view it, right? The short-term picture, the long-term picture. Short-term picture, I think you're setting yourself up to potentially be in a bad situation here because you're waffling on who should be the backup quarterback in a week where it's not unlikely that a backup quarterback plays. I think they have to be aware of that too. So what's the plan there? Is it Bailey Zapp behind Dillon Gabriel or is it Shedeur behind Dillon Gabriel? Do they feel like Shedeur is at a place where he can go out there in an NFL game and not embarrass himself? That's really the question here. The fact that they don't have an answer on that right now is not the greatest thing or the greatest sign for Shedeur Sanders' development, right? If they felt like Shedeur was lighting it up in practice and killing it in the coaches' meetings and, you know, was just itching at the seams to be the starting quarterback for this team, they would have no problem naming him the backup right now. Like, if the evidence was overwhelming that Shedeur was just amazing there, they would have no problem making him the backup. But it seems like they're hesitant about it, at the very least. If not willing to do it. Doesn't mean that his career is going to stink or anything like that. Maybe he's one of those guys who just needs the extra time. And I do think people need to allow themselves the possibility that Shedeur might be one of those prospects that just needs to cook in the oven a bit longer. I've said this since he was a prospect at Colorado. I like Shedeur Sanders as a prospect, but I'm going to be honest with you. The prospects that play like Shedeur Sanders in college, they usually take a very long time to get acclimated to the NFL, much longer than people assume. It's just a lot you have to learn to be successful without being an overwhelmingly great athlete at the quarterback position in the NFL to be successful. It's just a lot. It's a lot. Takes a while. So that's where I sit with this. I leave today with more questions than I had after they made the trade. And I'm wondering, the thing that bothers me about the trade right now is not that you traded Joe Flacco. That doesn't bother me. I understand why you would be willing to trade Joe Flacco. It's not even the fact that Shador's not going to be the backup. Like, again, if you do not feel like Shador is ready for this, then by all means, do not make him the backup quarterback. I stand by that. For any quarterback, if you don't feel like a quarterback is ready, don't put him out there, right? With Dylan, they thought he was ready, and to be fair, he looked ready against the Vikings. We'll see if he looks ready against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's still a rookie. It's not out the realm of possibility. He looks like bad versus a Mike Tomlin defense. But do they feel like Shador's ready for this? What is the answer to that question? If the answer to that question is no, that's okay. I'm not upset if Bailey Zapp is the backup quarterback. What I don't love is that they make this trade without having a firm answer to that question. Like, I think you need to have the answer here for who's going to be your backup quarterback before you send all the paperwork in to trade Joe Flacco. I truly think that's just fair, right? I understand that the Bengals wanted to get this done as soon as possible, and they were probably rushing you like all hell, and you just wanted to get the deal done fast. But it's not a difficult conversation to have. Hey, do you feel like Shador could be the backup? Probably not. Okay, let's just also slide it out there that Bailey Zapp's going to be the backup too, right? Let's just not have this thing linger. Instead, it's lingering. Instead, you're waffling. And at this point, if you're not confident enough to just outright state that Shador should be the backup, then don't have him be the backup. You clearly aren't confident in it for whatever reason. Just let it wait another week, you know what I mean, or another couple of weeks. Be interested to see how the Browns move after this. If they go out and get another quarterback, we'll see. But yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts after they met with the media in practice for the first time this week. I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you think I am overlooking something here? Do you think that I am overblowing the fact that they are waffling on the backup quarterback position? Or do you think that I am right to be concerned about the waffling here on the backup quarterback situation? There's a lot to talk about. We'll see how this game goes, but y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.